I mean, I wanted to be free, and I was lucky enough to be given tastes of that freedom in small and large ways, and to be able to live life without the judge, because in my life, the judge was so present.
Right.
My upbringing, and I was trained to be an analytical, intellectual, and I was very hard on myself.
The critic.
And that was a big, in our family, that was a big habit, multi-generational habit. And to live life without the weight of that, without that sack of potatoes, that was for me worth the price of admission right there. And that was worth all of the unnecessary, asceticism that I put myself through.
Yeah.
And on the flip side of that, you could say, a lot of weight was taken off. And at the same time, with that weight coming off, I discovered that there's just so much bliss. There's so much uncaused, causeless joy. It's a term used a lot these days, but it's just that just wants to bubble up and experience when we're not beating the crap out of ourselves with self-recriminating thoughts and all of that. And that is wonderful. Being in flow, which is being in the flow state, because we're not impeding it.
You got to accentuate the positive. I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Hello and welcome to yet another show, Accentuating the Positive with Karen Swain. Boy, have I got someone wonderful to introduce you to today, the traveling guru, don't call me guru, meditation teacher, Ishtar Howell. Welcome to the show, Ishtar.
Thank you, Karen.
So beautiful to have you on the show. So how did we find each other? Facebook, I think. I think one of your students or friends, or actually, to tell you the truth, you came across my path. And I tuned into your energy and I'm like, ooh, this dude looks really interesting. Let me check him out. And I sort of put you on there. I'll check you out later. And then somebody that knows both of us connected us again. And I'm like, that's the universe speaking. Let me read out your very long bio, but it's going to go over your story. So you've done the rounds. You've been on many people's shows. You've been Buddha at the gas pump. You've been on Wisdom from North. You've been doing the rounds. So we won't go too much into your story because you've said it about 1 million times. But because your bio kind of goes over your story. Okay, Ishtar, born Thomas Howell, works as a meditation teacher, Ishara, monk, gardener, writer, and intuitive astrologer. A sense of himself as presence was a profound feature of his early years on Earth until about the age of 7. At 13, he was in a car accident that took his mother's life and initiated an NDE experience, or a near-death experience, which brought about a profound experience of Samadhi, which he experienced along with an intense grieving process. After this presence faded, Ishtar longed to return to this essence, resulting in an energetic spiritual search for a good many years, right? At the age of 17, you began a regime of meditation practices and aesthetic principles or disciplines that included waking to cold showers at 3 a.m., fasting, and 6 hours of daily meditation practice. Did that work?
Yes, it did a certain amount. The practices, I think, were a little bit, the ones I was doing back then were much more difficult than what I came to later, but it did certainly have quite a lot of profound effects. Yeah.
So the cold showers, is there something about having a cold shower? What does the cold shower do?
Well, there were a lot of different rationale that were expressed in the books that I was reading at the time, but one of them was certainly about cleansing the blood and, kind of having blood go down, blood come out. And though I wasn't doing the alternation with a sauna or a hot pool, that's really what gets that going. But it was certainly rousing me and waking me up and kind of getting me very much prepped for meditation, like you'd want to be if you're crazy enough to get up at 3 a.m.
Yeah,
So
you're crazy enough to have a cold shower at 3 a.m. It just reminds me when we were kids, my mother lived in this apartment block that had a sauna and a couple of pools, one indoor, one outdoor. And we used to sit in the sauna, jump in the outdoor pool, freezing, and then jump in the indoor, like do all this sort of like hot and cold thing. Who knew we were doing a meditation practice? We were just being kids. Anyway, okay, let's go on. Longing to find his path, he encountered a practice known as Ishara Ascension, an effortless and deeply pleasurable form of meditation. Several months after learning Ascension, found himself living on the Oregon coast in a monastic environment dedicated to this practice. The ashram life brought about a rapid acceleration in growth, leading to ever more consistent experiences of silence, enclosed eyes meditation practice while cooking for the community in cafes, doing service work, and planting gardens. So you're an avid gardener and chef, right? Meditation, eating, gardening, sounding good. After going through a 6 months intensive teacher training program that involved around 12 hours closed-eyed meditation a day, you began teaching classes around the world and living in various regional meditation centers. Seeming miracles, wild manifestations, consciousness and celestial perceptions were frequent occurrences as awareness slowly but surely saturated more and more of your life. So what sort of manifestations?
Oh God, well, I suppose some I mentioned in those copious other videos, but I think one of the wildest one was simply manifesting a bunch of customers just out of nowhere. In the cafe that we had, it just sort of suddenly bubbled up, and there we had 20 people come in the restaurant, a party of 20. We'd never had a party bigger than 8 before up to that point, and there was this just verbalization. Wouldn't it be cool if 20 people just like came into the cafe? And it was terribly surprising when they did, but at the same time not. And then after we served them, which we served in some sort of record time, totally immersed in the flow state, and they cleared out, we cleaned the table, it was still there. And so there was, wouldn't it be cool if 18 people came in? And then sure enough, a party of 18 people came, we just sat them right back where the party of 20 was. And that was at the end of the day. And that 18, party of 18 cleared our refrigerators out. And so I was about to say, wouldn't it be cool? No, we're done. We're closed.
What about the loaves and the fishes? Couldn't you manifest?
Yeah.
No food, just manifest.
Yeah. I mean, I had always wanted to, because I was raised, to be rational and to be a critical thinker and to be skeptical. And I think those things are wonderful to maintain, and you don't have to lose them. But at the same time, I had longed to have experiences that were so big and so odd and so peculiar that my mind couldn't rationalize them away as just some sort of random coincidence. And that experience was among the many that were really dotting my life at the time, including basically kind of in a certain sense manifesting, in quotes, that job at the cafe, which was,
Okay, so I'm going to finish your bio in a minute, but when you're on this intense search for meaning and to return to presence, like the presence that you experienced during the NDE experience when your mum died, which we'll go into briefly, were you kind of asking the universe to like show you, is this stuff real? Is this stuff real? Like, were you kind of asking for these experiences? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I certainly was.
Yeah, me too. I did, because I was working as an energy healer, and I was like just seeing all psychic stuff. But I said to the universe, I want to see something physical. I want to see some physical thing. But people didn't come to me as a healer dripping with their wounds. So it wasn't like I was healing people's physical, like cuts and broken arms and things like that. But my daughter gave me that experience of cutting herself, and I put my hand over it, and we both just did the healing technique. We just asked for healing, and it instantly healed. Instantly sealed. And I'm like, okay, cool. Thank you for that. So I was asking. So you were asking, right? Ask and you shall receive. because as you say, that critical mind, you need to prove this to me. Yeah, you know, like we need to. All right, so where are we? In 2008, you left the monastic life and took an extended break from meditation teaching. The years lived outside the semi-cloistered environment of the ashram were often challenging, but ultimately led to more deeply anchored presence. This process continued to unfold, or continues to unfold and expand. Since 2014, you have began teaching Ascension and working as a spiritual guide, giving people a reliable practice with which to cultivate awareness and assisting people in relaxing into presence as a constantly lived experience. Since 2015, you've also been working as an intuitive astrologer with a primary focus on helping people align more completely with their soul's purpose. Do you think that that's what astrology really brings us, like an understanding of what we're doing here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the focus that I take with it, because that's always, I'm a little bit biased and wired, toward dharma and ultimate purpose, and let's just get to the marrow of what this life is supposed to be about, and run towards it expeditiously. And astrology has seemed to, as skeptical as I was for years and years, and kind of still am, it has borne out to be a wonderful, insightful map into people's dharmas and what they're here for, what they're here to learn, and the sort of the vector of their growth.
Yeah. So dharma, the word dharma, what is your understanding for people that don't understand the word dharma?
Well, I like to call it the North Star. I think everybody has a North Star. Everybody has a general direction of which their life is looking to move, which for them is going to be the highest path of growth. That for them, that is going to ultimately be the most fulfilling and the most filled with bliss and joy. And if people follow that, then life tends to get easier and easier as they're not going against the grain of where their soul is ultimately trying to go anymore. And so,
okay, so we've had people like Robert Schwartz on the show who talks about your soul's plan and your soul's journey, and he talks about how we all plan our life before we come. We have a general plan. That's the only way I can say it, like a goal, but ultimately free will to sort of get to that goal anywhere we want. But the goal is always some spiritual lesson. So we've talked a lot about, with different teachers on the show, how we often write into the script of our lives the dramas and the things that happen to us that we wouldn't choose from this linear mind perspective. Do you think that your soul's plan, and do you think that you can also see this in an astrology chart, was like the experience with your mother when you were, how old were you, 7 or 13? 13.
13.
Do you think you
yes,
scripted that in?
A good astrologer can. I looked at my chart, and it wasn't the chart wasn't that evocative, or it didn't really indicate something strongly there. However, well before I had any interest in astrology, as a young man, there was often a sense of sort of going down into a vast silence, and be connected to what felt like a script, what felt like this sort of river that was already there, that I was kind of already following, and especially around my mother's death, because the night before I had a very strong precognitive sense that she was going to die, which was very peculiar, because I'd never had that fear with my mother before. Always with my father, never my mother. And it was, so.
So the accident, you were in the car, and obviously the car hit you and killed your mom. And at the time that happened, you had your sort of NDE experience, which was that sense of presence that you were experiencing, right? Like did you leave your body and look? You didn't really leave your body and look down on your body. You just had it while you're in your body, didn't you?
Yeah. So of course, there was also a sense in which there was most certainly a great deal of call it non-localized awareness.
Right.
and in the ambulance there was a sense of both being in my body and looking down at the same time, which was interesting. And there was a sense of being everywhere that just existed at the same time as having a fairly, solid, normal, mundane experience of being in the body. So.
I know I know. Look, I've spoken to a lot of people on the show who have had NDEs, and most of them, pretty much all of them, except for Nancy Rhines, who was hit by a truck a few years ago. She was an atheist before she had her NDE. She had this experience of watching the accident, like watching her body being dragged under the truck and being in her body being dragged under the truck simultaneously. But she experiences it as these two perspectives. Whereas I've had this experience of, after calling out to spirit, I want to have an experience too, of coming back into my body after a nightly, adventure, doing something in other planes, talking to spirit guides and having a lovely time. I'm sure we do that every night, but I was having this experience of remembering as I was coming back into my body, and I didn't see what a lot of people say, like I was looking at my body from outside my body. I had that experience of being in the body and out of the body simultaneously, but not in two perspectives, in all perspectives. It's kind of, it's weird to explain it. I don't know how to explain it. Is that what you experienced?
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. I felt myself within everything, within all the parts as the whole. Almost like a holograph, that something of the whole is in every part in a holograph. So that's a good metaphor, I think, for that sort of experience, like this omnipresence, just everywhere.
So here you are, this 13-year-old kid, your mum's died, you've had this weird experience according to you, like I'm sure at 13 you're going, or maybe you were just enjoying it. I don't know. Was it just feeling like you were at home, like, oh, I'm home again? And then at the same time you're going through grief, so you're having ecstasy and grief kind of like dovetailing with each other, right? How did that work?
Well, when it was working, it worked seamlessly, and it was that little period of life was the easiest I had ever lived life up to that time, and I noted that. It was so fluid. There was no friction caused by any sort of self-consciousness. There was no pretense. It was freedom, for me, which was interesting. I didn't feel guilty about it. I know, some people would often feel guilty about that, but there was no ability for me to feel guilty at that point. And so it was more or less, it felt like, that before that I was just sort of mainly riding in a few superficial layers of consciousness. Like an ocean, I was close to the surface, but when that happened, I was sent, and I felt as if I was living the full spectrum. So up here you had grief and punching a door and being angry and being sad, but here at the same time, coexisting was just this profound silence and bliss and joy, and the sense that everything was completely in perfect order. So there was no sense of victimhood, there was no.
So you could have the negative emotion and the anger and the frustration and the crying, but enjoy it at the same time, like we enjoy crying when watching a movie. So there was a sense of experiencing it but being detached from it. Would that be more like what
well, there's certainly a detachment in the sense that before in my life, of course, the feelings that you don't like or you judge, you resist like hell, but there was no resisting. So in some ways I wouldn't even use the word detachment, because there was no arm's length. I was in everything, but there was
enjoying it.
Everything was undergirded by this wonderful bliss, which just came out of this vast dimension, which I'd known throughout childhood, but never had a consistent experience of to have that sense of freedom that was present. So it was a difficult thing for a 13-year-old to articulate, even one with a kind of a good vocabulary. It was just something that I was enjoying the experience of and exploring for as long as it stayed around.
I remember when my daughter was little, she was like 14, 15. She had this boyfriend for a nanosecond, and he broke up with her to go out with another girl. and she was downstairs crying and carrying on, and I'm like, being a dutiful mother, I go downstairs to try and, you know, soothe her, and I'm saying things like, but you were happy before you had this boy. He's not the source of your happiness, you know. And she just looks up at me and she goes, I know that, Mum. Let me have my drama. And I remember thinking, oh, yeah, I forgot. You know, we come to this planet to have the drama, to experience it. How much of it we give ourselves is up to us, right? So, like, you kind of forget that sometimes there's nothing need fixing. You just got to go through it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All the world's a stage, and we're but players on it. And the only thing, the thing that's helpful is that the only problem is that we just forget that we're something different than the character, and that's
right. Exactly.
the trick.
And is that what you are teaching people now, like through your work? So having experienced it and then explored it with every angle through monastic life and 15 million hours of meditation, you've come to that realization that we can be here, be physical, experience all the emotions and the drama, and love it from, like, see it from your soul's perspective, like enjoy it from your soul's perspective. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. Cool. All right. So where should we go from here? I've got a couple of questions here that I just jotted down this morning. Do you think we have to, what have I written? Do you think we can experience the same deepening in spiritual growth without a like monastic life, or without this 15 million hours of meditation? Do you think we can get there without kind of going through what you went through and getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, having cold showers and stuff?
Yeah, God, yeah, certainly that. Well, absolutely. I'd have to say yes, but it also depends upon the person, you know, and so to me, looking back, you know, with hindsight, I mean, kind of even at the time, it was pretty clear that I was going to have to put myself through some paces. That was not, for no reason. That there was a sense that that's just what's in the story, bud. So get lined up with that. Enjoy it. You know, enjoy that cold shower. You know, at age 17. But other people are completely different, and you know, people don't even need to do a meditation practice. It just so happens that for the most part, practically speaking, it's incredibly helpful for most people. Like I had friends who I reckon they were enlightened that I knew when I was a teenager, and they would tell me, you know, you're already enlightened, and I would, you know, just start laughing. I take it in because, like, yeah, you know, that might be true, but I'm definitely not experiencing that, you know. So, you know, where the rubber meets the road in this life, I'm going to have to, you know, do something to kind of, you know, clear off the dross and get reconnected with that, you know, that reservoir of awareness that you keep, you know, seeing.
Okay, well, that's a good question right there. So you're already enlightened, but I'm definitely not experiencing that. What do you think or feel or know that experiencing enlightenment looks like in daily life, like outside of monastic life, like in daily life? What does experiencing enlightenment look like?
You know, same thing it would in somebody living within the walls of the monastery. I mean, that's because there's a lot of people in a monastery who definitely aren't experiencing that yet, but it's just sort of a presence. There's well, I like to use that word samadhi, and it's, you know, it's Sanskrit, so I'll break that down into English, functional English, and it's this silence, it's this peace that passes all understanding. It's this kind of an ineffable experience, because we could throw a lot of words, silence and stillness or whatever, at it, but all of those words are very imperfect approximations of really what's a universal experience, you know, the peak experience that Maslow talked about. And so that place of not being entangled with the memories of the past and judgments and that sort of, and that place of not projecting into the future, when that falls away, there's that field that the Rumi quote speaks of. And so enlightenment is essentially just a plateau in which that context has become the dominant context of life, as opposed to the, you know, the little person that we're sort of taught to attenuate to, the little commentator that sits up somewhere behind the forehead, at least for most Westerners. And, you know, that noise can settle down into, you know, settle down and kind of fall away into that quietude. And that quietude becomes the anchor of life and the central context of life. And I think there are different, certainly different developments and levels. And I don't think enlightenment is a sort of a static, one doorway type experience. I think people will continue to grow, but that's the basis of it, is that silence becomes the main context in everything.
So it's identifying more with the presence as self rather than the character that you've created as the personality physical construct, like the mental physical personality construct, who is me, not this body, not this mind, not this personality. Like, this is the character I'm creating on the stage of life, and I'm identifying with the creator of the character as opposed to the character, right?
Right. And, I was told something like that, even a good description of what it is, like when I was 18 and it first showed up, people would say like, hey, you're touching Samadhi. I'd be like, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. Could you point that out to me? And, nobody could. But then, as I kept going with the meditation practice, eventually I was like, oh, you mean that sort of space of awareness? God, that's been there the whole time, but I wasn't even looking at it because we're trained to look at words and noise and all these things that aren't quite so subtle as what I might call pure awareness, or awareness without any, that's unbroken into little objects. It's almost like exactly. We spend, we live in the wave world, and we go to school and we get raised up, and we identify ourselves as the little wave of the ocean. We see all the other little waves, but we forget that we're the entire ocean.
Yeah.
And,
I know we have intense training to identify with, especially the body and the emotions and the mind and the personality. And we have intense training to be identified with that. And I suppose you went on an intense training to get unidentified with that, like to be identified with the, I remember when I was young, having this experience of breaking up with some boy and being devastated and hating myself and hating the world and wanting to commit suicide, doing drama. And I had this experience of being present to me, like sitting on the couch, eating popcorn, watching me going through the drama, like the witness, as Nancy did when she's being dragged under a truck and she's having this experience of watching it as well as doing it. And I remember thinking, gee, that was odd. But that one that was watching me doing the drama was really enjoying the show. Like, I was like eating popcorn going, oh, this is a good movie. So I had to figure all that out. What was that all about? But that identifying with the person that's watching the show rather than the actress on the stage, right? Is that the presence you're talking about?
That is a facet of opening into that experience. Absolutely. Yeah. That is yeah.
So what was happening for you when it really clicked in for you that this is like, you're not your personality body construct, that you're great? Like, what was happening in your life and that really, you really embodied that?
Oh no, I don't think I noticed what was happening. I think
was it a gradual progress?
Yes, very gradual, very gradual. It's kind of like I tell people that you can be driving from Illinois to Wisconsin. Maybe I should use a better metaphor. You'd be driving from Italy to Switzerland. There, that's better. And
from Sydney to Melbourne.
You won't necessarily, you won't necessarily know that you're in Switzerland right when you cross the border. It's often that you maybe you hit Lucerne or something and say like, oh, this is different than Italy. And so I think that all those different mileposts in my life, that has most typically been the case, where you're kind of cruising, you're already in that territory, but you're not really paying, you're not looking for where you're at, you're not paying attention, just doing your practice and enjoying the silence. And then all of a sudden you find, okay, it's saturated to this point, and here we are. So, yeah.
I've written down a couple of questions here. And one of them is, how does it change your life? Like, for people that do experience that awareness, how do you think it changes their lives? Like, how did it change yours, experiencing that awareness? What are we to do with it? Like, why seek it? Just to overcome negative emotion, or like to enjoy negative emotion rather than to be, how do you think it changed?
I wanted to be free, and I was lucky enough to be given tastes of that freedom in small and large ways, and to be able to live life without the judge, because in my life the judge was so present.
Right.
My upbringing, and I was trained to be a analytical, intellectual, and I was very hard on myself.
The critic.
And that was a big, in our family, that was a big habit, multi-generational habit. And to live life without the weight of that, without that sack of potatoes, that was for me worth the price of admission right there. And that was worth all of the unnecessary, asceticism that I put myself through.
Yeah.
And on the flip side of that, you could say, a lot of weight was taken off. And at the same time, with that weight coming off, I discovered that there's just so much bliss. There's so much uncaused, causeless joy. It's a term used a lot these days, but it's just wants to bubble up and experience. When we're not beating the crap out of ourselves with, self-recriminating thoughts and all of that. And that, is wonderful. Being in flow, which is, being in the flow state, because we're not impeding it with all of that stuff. That's magical. And I've always enjoyed magic. I've always enjoyed that sense of serendipity and synchronicity and just being so easy and so let go that you just find yourself in the right place at the right time, and there you are. That's been something that has increased manifold.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, the flow state is so cool, isn't it? Just everything. Look, I remember now, what was I doing? I'd gone to New Zealand. A relative had died. She was very old. And I brought back a few bits of furniture that was hers, including this thing behind me. And I had to pick it up from customs. But I was in that flow state. I don't know what I was doing to get in that flow state. And customs is always like queues and fill out paper and go to the next window and fill out more paper and go to the next window. It's always drama. And I remember driving to the airport, no traffic, parking right outside, plenty of car spaces, walking in, a couple of people, getting a ticket, going up to the counter. Like it just went bang, 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 bang. And I was home within half an hour, and it just flowed. And I'm thinking, damn, how did that happen? It just, everything just, I said to the lady at the counter, why is there no one here today? Isn't it like normally really packed? And she goes, yeah, it's really odd. But yeah, it's just like the universe just lined up all the details to have it happen just effortlessly, just picking up a box from customs, I know, but that flow, but I really noticed that flow, that there was just effortlessness and no drama. Yes. And I don't know how I got in that flow state. I must have been doing something. That's what you're talking about, that life just becomes like whatever you need to do, it's effortless. And things just line up and manifest, right?
And even when it seems that it ain't effortless, that if you have that connection to that sort of an anchor in that silent presence, even that becomes a flow, which is interesting. It's contradictory for me to say that, but
you can enjoy it. Yeah,
you can enjoy it, and in that there's this wonderful heart expansion that within difficulties, within seeming difficulties, and I think for most people that keep going, there's that, I use the word seeming difficulties, there's a wonderful tendency to not be fooled on appearances at ever more fundamental levels of that statement. And, taking, kind of a natural expansion of the platform from which one views life, it becomes broader and more expansive, and thus one catches on fewer things. One has fewer problems, and then there's a virtuous circle. One flows more, and I found that it's like it's a user-friendly universe. Now
I was just thinking of that, of Wayne Dyer or Byron Katie, Byron says it's all happening for you. Wayne Dyer says it's a friendly universe. It's all, life is happening for you. Even the drama is happening for you. And to be in that knowing at the time when the shit hits the fan, it's like, it's all good. It's all good. This is happening for me, not to me. Yeah, that's that flow state. User-friendly universe. I like that one. That's Ishtar saying. You'll have to do some, like Byron does. You know how Byron has all those quotes? You've got to get your quotes happening.
Oh, no.
Oh, all righty. What are the other questions here? How does it benefit this world? Yeah, so when people do get into this state, how does it benefit this world when people are more in flow state and living from presence?
That right there is a few chapters of a book in and of itself. I find that being in that flow state, being in that presence is very much correlated with having a sense of being loved, with having a sense of wholeness that's in there. And when one person moves from a sense of wholeness and love, that starts to,
Ripple.
It's infectious. It starts to ripple. A lot of our, say, a lot of the political problems or difficulties, I think you can boil them down to a lot of people having overtaxed adrenals, a lot of people getting stuck in say, the fight or flight response, or the various mechanisms of the limbic system, the reptile brain, which is a kind of a very narrow and small view of the universe, good for punching a saber-toothed tiger, not great for kind of having a calm and broad perspective and loving perspective of life. And I find that the more that people saturate in that presence and saturate in that love, they become more and more immune from being pushed into that tiny corner of who they are, more immune to fear, and so I think politically that's going to be something that becomes very helpful. Probably have.
Yeah, it's interesting, watching the world change and watching the movements happen. There's quite a few movements happening. Like there is this conscious movement where people are waking up to the game that we are participating in, and that seeing how that it is a control game, and that we have been trained, as we were talking about, to be focused on who we are, who we're pretending to be rather than who we really are. And then as they wake up, they get really angry about it and start screaming and yelling at the control drama and the cabal and the reptilians are controlling us. And I just see that a lot. And they're kind of as much immersed in that game of war or opposites or polarity, as they were immersed in the I've got to struggle and pay the rent and do what. Right. It's just interesting.
The problem of evil, that's the old philosophical name for that whole area, and also the normal vicissitudes of life, they just kind of get either wholly cleansed or certainly softened by immersion in that state of presence, in which, if we go deep enough down that rabbit hole, the sense of I and thou, or self and others, that starts to get quite porous and starts to break down. And there's a sense that the more we go into that presence, the more love becomes a fundamental ingredient of our experience. And when people are in love, when people have it streaming through them, again, it's a user-friendly universe. Even if there are reptilian overlords or demonic entities, when you're in that state of powerful love, it's like, hey brother, hey sister, how you doing? Yeah, no, I don't feel like being sacrificed tonight. No, thank you very much. And it's maybe naive and optimistic, but there's an alchemizing power in love that people talk about. But once we start to dip into that more and more, it's we've been selling it short, and our horizons are too small for what love can do and how much love can flow through a human nervous system, and how much it can transform this whole world from the top to the bottom.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I talk about this because one of the messages of my show really is about deliberate creation, and most people think that deliberate creation is about creating, you know, the stuff of life, like the holidays and the shoes and the big houses and the cars and stuff. But really what I talk about is creating, like what we're being deliberate about is creating that peace, that joy, that love, like creating the acceptance, the knowing, the expansion, because that's what we're creating, right? And then from that place of being in that flow state, as you call it, knowing that, what did you say? What was your little meme? The universe is, what was your little saying before? User-friendly. Love that. Knowing that it's a user-friendly universe. Then you can create anything you want from that space, right? You can create universes, worlds, you can create anything. And usually when you hit that state, all that stuff you think you need, you don't really need, actually. Oh, the fast cars and the holidays and even the lover, someone to love you, or because all that is kind of, you're wanting to manifest that to fill some void or hole that you think that you're not enough or not worthy enough or you haven't got enough or
That's right there. I mean, it's a game of hide and seek we've been playing with ourselves. That's the game. We have wholeness. Wholeness is already here. The kingdom of heaven, in Christian terms, is already here. And we've just got the blinders on. And so the whole game is taking those blinders off and coming back into that recognition, because we're all the prodigal sons and daughters of our own higher self. And,
But something that struck me, Susie Hanson's, I had this woman, she's a New Zealand woman, she wrote a book called The Dual Soul Connection. So we're talking about ETs. So she's a dual soul. She's like, not that your soul is either human or ET, but from her ET perspective, she chose to come into a physical human life. So she did her soul plan from that perspective, as opposed of the perspective of her spirit or higher self or whatever you would call it, or soul perspective. She was having another life as an ET and then chose to come in to this life, which is really fascinating. But what fascinated me about her experience is when she's up on the ship, she had this experience of them teaching them about manifestation. And so they could dematerialize their body and rematerialize it into any object they liked, because they have that dominion over energy. They understand that it's all energy and information and they can mold it any way they like, which to our human puny mind perspective is seemingly like impossible. But one thing she said that struck me was that the humans couldn't do it because we couldn't reach that level of bliss and joy that they were working in order to do that. So they couldn't raise their vibration enough in order to have that dominion over the molecules. Is this making sense?
Oh, yeah, I absolutely understand you. Yes. Yeah. I would disagree.
Okay.
I don't.
Tell me.
I think there have been credible stories of human beings who have I think had plenty of enough bliss and joy in them, who have manifested crazy.
Oh, no, I'm not saying all human beings. She was just talking about the humans that were on the ship at the time who were trying to do it, because the ETs were saying, let me show you how to do this. And then but she said she was in this ecstatic state of bliss and love, but she just couldn't reach that. She couldn't, like the people and the other humans that were being taught by the ETs. And I just remember thinking, wow, like we've got so much to learn as humans. We've just got so much to learn. But they seem to have moved beyond this negative emotion. They seem to have moved to this space where they're living in that flow state that we're talking about all the time. So they've got complete, I don't know, power.
Well, there's
awareness.
The ego, having the ego structure as sort of the center of our being, that is an awful lot of tension. There's an awful lot of energy put into maintaining that. Just like when we talk about the shadow self in Jungian terms, that is basically just an organized structure of repression. We have a prison inside us for all that at some point we deemed undesirable about ourselves, and it's not a one-time sort of energetic expenditure. It's something that has to constantly be done. We've done it so long habitually that we don't even know we're doing it. So we're really good at adapting and really maladaptive sort of ways. And when that, when that falls away, when all that maladaptive kind of tension falls away, boy, there's just, it's like we're all these beautiful plants that have our petals sort of held in, and then take the straitjacket off, and there's, they just want to unfold and unfurl.
Is
So
that what
I think
it would be explained as a Kundalini experience? Do you think that falling away of that shadow body and then that energy starts to rise? Would that be called like a Kundalini experience?
and that that Kundalini is one of the, I think, the manifestations of, if you think about ourselves, another metaphor, we're like tubes, and we're like hoses. We get all kinked up, but that's the tension. And as that kinking releases, there's lots of stuff, not just Kundalini, but also prana. Prana wants to, in Sanskrit term, prana or chi, if you want to use that term, wants to flow, and because we're tensed up, functionally, we're impeding the flow, and as we open up, all sorts of stuff happens. Some people are going to have Kundalini experiences. Some people might have come into this life and they might have done that already. That might have happened in another life. It may not have to happen in such a dramatic form as many accounts paint out. I mentioned that because a lot of people, get the notion that, I got to have this, this thing happen to me, and that's going to be one of my benchmarks, and it's not necessarily so for everybody. But,
what, they have to have the Kundalini experience, like I'm going to manifest the Kundalini experience.
Yeah, they make a checklist, and
like tick that off, tick that off, tick that off. I've heard you say that you're a fan of Autobiography of a Yogi. How old were you when you read that?
What's that?
How old were you when you read that book?
Oh, God, I was 17 and 18. Right around my birthday.
Because in that book, what I talk about with Susie and her ET experiences, as you say, is talked about in that book, all these manifest. Like I remember Sri Yukteswar did a beam me up Scotty thing in the yoga, like, didn't he? Like he had that sort of same, what's the word? Control is not the right word, but dominion over manifestation to the point where he could bilocate, right? I remember reading that book thinking, is this real? Or is this just fantasy? Like, I just was like, what do you think about all that?
Yeah, oh God, of course that drew me in, and I as skeptical as I was, I had a tendency to believe that it was all true. It had the resonance of actuality to me, and I haven't experienced someone in this life bilocate. I've certainly experienced a lot of weird stuff up to that point, so I'm a little bit primed to think that
it's possible.
Possible.
So what have you experienced in that respect, like during your meditations?
Mainly a great deal of more sort of psychic stuff,
right?
Which has been of the nature that it has tended to demonstrate that consciousness seems to be the primary constituent, not matter. That consciousness is not some sort of random epiphenomena that comes off of biological complexity. And so, for instance, this is maybe a minor tale, but it's fun. I remember one of my really good friends at the monastery. Somehow our basement there had flooded, and so a lot of us had to be moved out of there. And I ended up bunking next to him up in a living room, and while the basement was being sort of pumped out, and I was awake, he was asleep, but I was kind of in a meditative, wakeful space where I was actually thinking in conversation to him, but then he was replying while sleeping verbally out of his mouth to what I was thinking, and this went on for this 15 minutes, and we were talking about the Great Pyramid of all things, and ancient megalithic construction, and so that that experiences like that have been aplenty.
Okay, so you're communicating telepathically, but because he was asleep,
he was sleeping,
responding verbally. He was responding verbally rather than telepathically.
Yes, stuff like that. I remember I had this friend named Austin when I was a teenager, and one of the things that I didn't fully appreciate at the time was he basically found things for me like Edgar Cayce would find things for clients. And in my case, it was my retainer. I had to wear this little, I found it uncomfortable, plastic retainer. It was so easy to lose because it was clear, and I would lose it so frequently. And I as a teenager, then I would kind of sort of panic because I didn't want my dad to know that I'd lost my retainer. So when I couldn't find it, I'd torn the place up. I would give Austin a call, and he would invariably be laughing because he knew I was looking for my retainer even the first time without a precedent. And he said, "Oh, so you lost your retainer?" I was like, "Yeah, you know where it is?" And he said, "Let me tune in." And he would go. He'd never been in my house, and he never described my house to him. He said, "You know that blue couch in your TV room? Well, it's on the left angle, the left side of it, and it's in the newspaper. You left it in the fold of the newspaper, you silly boy." And then I went and checked, and it wasn't there. And I went back to the phone. He said, "No, you didn't look very well. You have to go look at that end of the paper." And there it was. And this went on over maybe a period of 5 months. I lost it about 7 times, and he found it every time.
Okay. So you were around, how old are you at the time? Around 17 then?
Oh, then I was 15. Yeah,
oh,
15,
so you were
16.
really young. So who's Austin? Like, he's just a friend? Like, who is he?
He was a friend of mine. He passed away a few years back.
Was he an older man, or is he a kid?
Yeah. No, I was 16 and he was 54. So that was we were
Was he
buddies.
a meditation teacher? Like, who was he?
Kind of, sort of. He was introduced to me by another friend who was a local psychic and a transcendental meditation teacher.
Right.
And after she moved out of town, he became my sort of local psychic mentor friend.
Yeah.
And Austin was he a self-described walk-in, and so and apparently the one who walked in was essentially something of a Native American shaman type.
Okay.
And so that wasn't my path, and he never pushed it on me because he knew it wasn't. But that was his focus. But the thing I liked about him so much from the beginning was that he had in his presence that presence that I'd felt in the accident.
So you recognized. So you had this experience of presence in your sort of your NDE, and so you recognized it when you met him, like, oh, that same feeling happens with you. Yeah. Yes. Did you ever ask him how he did that? Like, I'm sure as a kid.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I thought it was rather simpler than how he explained it, but he said, like, yeah, I just talked to my team. I was like, you know, all right,
the mob,
cool. Go talk to your team. That was his description. And sometimes he would say, like, no, I just knew that one. And so it was
just like had an instant knowing, like, just like a flash, like it's there. Yeah. Yes, or he'd say, okay, team, tell me, like, show me, tell me. Yeah, that's what I do. Talk to the team. I don't always get the answers, but often I do. So do you talk to your team? Have you met your team? Your mob? I call them the mob.
I have a rather different experience than that. For me, that sort of thing typically comes through direct knowing, and just sort of letting go and tuning in and tapping in. I remember as a teenager going to a meet your spirit guides workshop.
Yes.
And it seemed that I was successful, but when I contacted them, they laughed at me and said I had everything that I needed already. So we're not going to tell you much. So you're good. And that was the contact.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No, I get that.
Laughter was included. So
lots of laughter. Absolutely. You're good to go. Yep. I know. And then trying to work out how you're good to go. Really? I have it. Could you explain it more? Like, the curious mind still asks questions, and they're just laughing at you, going, "Oh, you're so funny," with all your questions.
Yeah. It was. I knew pretty early on that my life was a comedy, and it was kind of funny groping around in the dark in those teenage years. Although at the time it didn't feel funny, but
no, it doesn't feel funny when you're in a car accident and your mum's. But it doesn't feel funny at the time.
That was.
But another one. I keep bringing up other people on the show, but after years, like, I've been showcasing new old teachers probably for around 20, 25 years, both on radio and in person. And there's many stories that I've heard. Have you seen Natalie Sudman? She was blown up in Iraq in a roadside bomb, and she had this amazing NDE. She wrote a book called The Application of Impossible Things. But one of the things that struck me about her from that spirit side perspective, she was designing her injuries, and she would see, you know, like her life play out with different injuries, and her spirit guide were like falling around laughing at her character, you know, sort of groping around in the dark with one blind eye or a broken arm or whatever, as they were designing, you know, looking at the different injuries. And, you know, from that perspective, we're hilarious. But when you're down here, like boots on the ground, not so funny, right? Not so funny. Not so funny when you go blind or you can't use your arm or whatever. But yeah, their sense of humor is just beyond. Okay, so astrology. When did you start studying astrology?
Well, I certainly had an interest in that from a pretty early age, since, you know, my early teens and before. But I had such an ambivalence about it that I didn't really seriously study it until my early 30s, late 20s. I didn't really do it when I mean serious, you know, very systematic and committed, and, you know, just diving right in. And I'm glad that it turned out that way, because, you know, then looking back at my life, you know, through my birth chart and the transits and progressions and all that sort of stuff, then I could see how eerily, you know, my life had followed the important transits and progressions, the important changes in the astrological weather. And know that, you know, no astrological knowledge that I might have had at all influenced the course of events in any way. So
Right.
that was nice to do it that way.
So you think having the knowledge of like seeing things that's going to happen is going to help us deal with it when it comes up? Like if someone's charting you and they say, okay, when you're this age, you've got this big transit, so something big's going to happen, or...
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't like to practice astrology as sort of a fortune teller.
Predictive thing, right? Yeah.
As a predictive thing. Although I know some people who seem to be pretty damn good at that, and
right.
I have no problem with it. It's not really my flavor, because, you know, generally I think of astrology as kind of an ancillary tool, ultimately, that can be quite helpful, you know, depending on the context. Rather, I prefer teaching people meditation, where I can teach them how to fish, basically, and give them a tool which they can use so that no matter what is happening, they're going to be cool and they're going to be able to flow with it.
Okay, so the question I get asked by lots of my clients, because I don't teach meditation, I have done lots of meditation, I have taught lots of meditation, but I don't currently. And I tell people to go off and meditate, and they say, I can't do it. I just can't do it. So as a meditation teacher, what would be one of your tips for people that have tried to sit, and they just get frustrated, or their mind is like crazy bees, or they just can't, they tell me they can't do it. And I just say, keep trying. And they go, oh, but I can't, I get so frustrated. What would be one of your tips for those people who feel like they can't meditate?
Quite a few tips. So shut me up if I go on too long.
Give us a couple.
Well, first of all, I think having an effortless approach in which one doesn't have to fight their mind is helpful. Understanding meditation is not about having a completely blank mind and not trying to go for that. Although even if you're told that 100 times, people still often do that because they have that preconception. But letting go of that preconception and being innocent with the process. And there are practices. My current practice is one that doesn't require the mind, to be shut up. There's no oppositional relationship. Instead of trying to chain the monkey mind, it's more like giving it an ideal banana. So I think that, and this is different for everybody, but I think mantra meditation is wonderful. It has been wonderful for me, and that there's kind of an attractive object that, instead of moving the mind outward like almost every other type of thought, has a tendency of sort of pulling the mind back down towards the source of thought. And there are certain, I think, objects of thought which are inherently more pleasing than others in that way. And so that those two things right there, I think would be the biggest tips I would give to people is don't try to fight your mind. Don't try to make it quiet. Understand that sometimes there's going to be a hellacious amount of thoughts, and have some sort of vehicle that you can use very effortlessly and gently, not like guys at the Ganges River going Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. That I wouldn't recommend that sort of use of mantras, but a very effortless, back and forth, organic flow to the meditation, I think, is for most people is going to be of great benefit.
Right. So mantra, kirtan. There's lots of mantra and kirtan happening here in Sydney. It's like it's going off. Everyone's singing mantra and kirtan and getting into that flow state through music and mantra and stuff. So that would be like the mantra meditation that you.
Yeah, well, actually, there's a couple ways of doing mantra. That's one way of doing it, and I think that can be quite effective. But the way I've typically done it has been a silent practice. So just purely thinking the mantra, not verbalizing it. And in the Vedic tradition, they're considered two different types of applications, ways of using mantra with different effects.
Yeah. So cultivating the witness. So when you're having crazy thoughts like, did I shut the door? Did I turn the gas off? Oh my God, tomorrow work's going to be so stressful, whatever they're thinking. Just like, oh, look at that. Look what I'm thinking. Like just witnessing those thoughts instead of being the thought, like witnessing that thought. Is that what you're talking about? That not resisting the mind?
Not necessarily. Sometimes that can lead one into becoming a little bit dissociative, or this kind of an artificial. When I think of the development of witnessing consciousness, I usually put it in a context of something that tends to naturally sort of arise. It's almost more of a relaxation into a deeper strata that occurs right along with all this stuff. So there doesn't need to be sort of a separation up there, but it's more of a relaxation through the meditation practice, and that's where it pops up, I think, most beneficially.
Yeah.
But but in meditation, it's like if you're sitting there and we close our eyes and all of a sudden there's, oh my God, there's a cacophony of thoughts going on in there. It's even more than I thought, so in the meditation practice itself would be kind of introducing your mantra, and and then letting whatever happens happen, letting whatever thought wants to come up, that's fine. It's gonna do that. If we have instant judgments of our thoughts, well, those are just thoughts too. We don't have to mess with that. And then we just come back to the meditative vehicle when we notice that we're off on some other tangent.
Yeah. So who are you teaching? Are you teaching people that are on an intense search for meaning like you were, or are you teaching like more mainstream people who just want to meditate because they want to quieten their monkey mind? Like, what's your audience that you're teaching when you're teaching meditation?
Everybody. It's a big mixed audience.
Right.
As far
so you're getting the newbies and maybe people that have been doing it for years. You're getting years people. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And do you teach them the same way, like it's across the board, the same sort of technique, or do you sort of mix it up? Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, one more. Oh, it's 11:11 because we're running out of time. But I wanted to ask you this about monastic life. I used to be married to a man who was a Hare Krishna for years, and when he was young, when he was 17, he wanted to become like a monk, like a Hare Krishna monk, but he couldn't because of his sexual energy. Like he couldn't contain that. And I've often thought about this. Like I thought, I'd hate to be a man. Because you've got like the sexual energy that surges through you is so much stronger, mostly for most men than it is for women, I think. And it can be so distracting. I had a woman on the show, Joanna, who was a transgender. She trans from being an alpha male to a woman. And when she started taking the hormones, the first thing she said was that she had this clarity of mind that she'd never had before because she wasn't thinking about sex 24/7. And I'm like, okay. So when you were doing the monastic thing, did you sort of suffer with that? Like,
no. Well, I mean, first thing is we weren't a celibate order.
Oh, you weren't. Oh, okay.
No,
all right.
No, we could have relationships and sex, and so the understanding was not trying to not have the physical act. It was more, the emphasis was placed on being conscious through all experiences of life.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And less what you're doing and more where you're coming from. So there wasn't ever that issue of
abstinence, complete abstinence. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Because I don't know. I mean, I think it's good for some, and I think it gets really lost inside mainstream religion like Catholicism, where they say, okay, you can't have sex anymore, because I don't think that they train Catholic priests.
For the most part, I think it's dreadful. Yes.
You think it's dreadful?
Yeah.
But there seems to be, in the Buddhist sort of traditions, there seems to be this training that they give their monks to like channel that energy differently rather than outwardly like channel it through their body. No, you don't think so? No?
The training given, but I happen to be in this life. People tell me they're dirt, and other monks, whether it's people tell me they're the naughty stories of their monastic orders and the schools. And so
I reckon there's a lot of it.
The Catholic Church, I'm hearing of lots of roshis in the Zen tradition who are getting retired because they're grabbing at women's breasts, out of nowhere. And there's a laundry list. And now there are practices which can rechannel the energy. That's sure, and some people may be effective at it, but at this point, I'm not quite sure, how effective it is for everybody. I think generally it's a bad deal. And on another point, this emphasis that's often in Hinduism placed upon, if you don't ejaculate, then you'll have, or in Taoism, the Taoists who are trying to become immortal by not ejaculating and have their chi go up. I think there's something to that. I think that can be gotten around with enough presence, with enough awareness, that I really don't see it as a big of a stumbling block to reaching higher plateaus as a lot of those teachings frame it.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, well, that's a whole show conversation, that sexual energy and spiritual energy. That's a whole show. But we're running out of time. So what would you like to leave our listeners with? What would be your message to the world, honey one?
Well, let's see. I think my message to the world would probably be that your own higher consciousness is closer than you think. And no matter how long, no matter how deep a hole you've dug for yourself in this life or others, once you start down the path toward awareness, it does not have to take the same amount of time as it took to go in. It takes far less time, because that presence is closer to us than our next breath. And enlightenment and expanding consciousness and meditation do not have to be difficult procedures. I've done the difficult, so I know how that goes. And
you've done the 3 o'clock cold showers.
I've done lots of stuff. I haven't buried myself in sand and lit fire around my head, which some people do. I didn't go to that extreme, but I went far enough, and I'm thankful that I was graced to be directed toward a path that is just effortless. It is so damn easy, that you wouldn't want to do it.
So your mantra would be to people, remember that it's easy, it's easy, it's easy. It's who I am, it's easy. So while they sit to meditate, instead of saying, damn, I can't do this, it's so hard, to change that to, this is easy.
And I always recommend, just because it's only been my path, but I always do recommend learning the Ishaya's Ascension practice. It's a wonderful practice.
And this is what you teach?
That's what I teach. And I also recommend transcendental meditation, although I'm more biased towards the first one, because that's where life led this body.
Yeah. The transcendental is the one that you get the mantra. There's a meditation teacher here in Sydney called Tom Cronin, who I've had on the show, and he teaches that. And I sent my daughter off to him when she was going through some dark nights of the soul to get her mantra from him. Really helped her, because mum can't teach you anything because you're mum, right? It's like, go away, mum, don't tell me what to do. It's like, all right, I'll pay someone to tell you what to do then. It's just going to cost me more money. Ishtar, it's been so beautiful to talk with you today, and one day we'll hopefully get you down under and you can show some people how to do the Ishtar Ascension meditation. That'd be lovely.
Yeah.
And do your astrology as well. Where can people find out more about you for people listening to this on audio only podcasts?
My websites, which I don't know if they're going to be seen on the audio only sites, but or one of them is www.ascension-meditation.com, and the other is www.awakenedlightastrology.com. And
okay.
I can be contacted through both of those websites.
Okay, great. Well, I'll have both those links on my page on my website with your audio and YouTube and more information. Have you written any books? Have you got any books coming out?
I will have one coming out. I'm not quite sure when. I'm more than halfway into it, and I plan on finishing it before the year is up, and we'll see which way I publish it. I might actually have a connection to a literary agent and a publishing house, so that would be kind of cool.
What's the name of the book?
Tentative.
Okay, working in progress.
Tentative. But it's mainly sort of, I basically wrote my life out because it's been chock full of crazy spiritual adventures, and it's kind of a teaching about consciousness through the lessons that I had to go through.
Adventures, yeah.
Spiritual adventures.
Well, I look forward to it coming out, and thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a delight.
Thank you very much. Yes, it absolutely has, and I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person when I come to Sydney. I don't know when that's going to be, but I have a feeling it might be next year. So
one day. Bye for now.
Yeah. Bye.
What an absolutely beautiful soul. As we do with most of the people I speak to on the show, we had this long conversation afterwards. We talked about so many things. We talked about predictive, more into that sort of predictive astrology, you know, how there are all these astrologers are putting out the weather forecast, you know, what Mars is going to do and what conjunction and this is going to happen. And Ishtar was saying that, no, he doesn't do that predictive astrology. It's more about getting to know who you are and why you're here, not this like the predictive weather patterns of astrology. But we did speak about, you know, next year, what's happening in the charts next year, which I didn't record. And he said there's just more of the same of what's been happening, sort of Pluto conjuncting Saturn. Pluto's more freedom, Saturn's more structure, and so they're these opposing, which is kind of stirring things up politically. And he said, you know, it's going to be more intense for that next year. But we all know that, right? So the shit's going to hit the fan even more. Like as the light expands on our planet, it dredges up all the dirt. When you turn the dimmer switch on, you see all the dirt. And then we have to be in that place of dealing with it, which we spoke about with that mindful presence, you know, when you're connected to that presence where you can watch the show, not be a part of the show as you, but be the more of the witness of the show or the creator of the show being life, and be in that place of bliss and joy. You can meet any challenge with ease and grace and stay in the flow state and know that it's happening for you and not to you. Anyway, beautiful man, beautiful meditator, meditation teacher, and psychic astrologer. I'm sure he's going to come. I can see him coming down under and talking to the younger generation down under and teaching meditation. I think he'd do well down here. Maybe you'd like to have him wherever you are in the world or in the States. He travels around. He said he's packing up his house now. He's going over to London to do some traveling. He travels around. Beautiful, beautiful, down-to-earth, young, spiritual teacher, master. Ishtar. Thanks again for watching. It's been a pleasure presenting another show for you. And you could check out his other talks on Buddha at the Gas Pump, and he was on Trisha Barker's show and Yannika's show, Wisdom from North. He's been on all sorts of shows where he talks more about what happened to him during that time where his mum died. His story's kind of spoken ad nauseum, so we didn't go too much into it if you want to hear more about his story. He spoke with, what's his name from Buddha at the Gas Pump? I can't think of his name. Sorry, I've forgotten your name. For a couple of hours. So that's a long conversation if you want to hear more from Ishtar. And what do I want to say to you about what's coming up? I'm very excited that Mary Rodwell's coming to Sydney. We're going to do some sort of like, we're going to find out who we are as galactic multidimensional beings in a small setting here in my home. So if you're in Sydney and you'd like to do a day with Mary and I, 15th of September, we're going to be doing that. But also Susie Hansen, who I spoke about on the show, is coming into the Inner Sanctum next month in September. Just trying to find a date, actually. Probably around probably my Monday the 16th, 15th in the US. And we're going to talk more about the ET technology, consciousness, what she experiences. She's fascinating. She's like one of my all-time favorites. I have to say, Susie Hansen's amazing. I just was amazed when I had that conversation with her. Her book, The Dual Soul Connection, is fascinating. I think all this meditation practice and training that we do here on Earth is like preparing us to move into that more expanded consciousness and being more deliberate with how we create our world. The ETs seem to know that. They seem to be all powerful with that. So, it's going to be a fascinating conversation online. If you want to meet Susie and pump her full of questions about ET connections and her experiences, go and have a look at the show that I did with her, I don't know, about a year ago. You'll see it there on YouTube or iTunes or Stitcher or Mixcloud, SoundCloud, wherever you're listening to this, and also on my website. If you put in Susie Hansen in the in the little menu thing, she'll come up. And so I think that's all I want to say to you. Love you all. Remember to buy the book, Awakened by Death, and I'll see you all next time. Big love to you.